need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
Hello there. This week, I'm very excited because I am joined by someone. Yes, guys, it's not just me talking to a mic, answering your questions. Today, I've got someone on board with me, Zandra from a podcast you may know. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit more, but I'm so excited to have you, Zandra. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your show, so it's very much an honor to be on it. And I know we're going to have a great conversation because we talked once before and we clearly have a lot to talk about. But the name of my show is called Slow Style Home. It had been Style Matters for many, many years. I rebranded about a year ago and everything. I mean, it doesn't really affect anyone who's listening. All of the episodes are still there and everything. But I wanted to change the name of the podcast as well as the name of my business, all under the same umbrella, Slow Style Home, because I felt like over the years, I was sort of developing a framework to teach other people how to do what I do. And the framework had been given a name. And I thought this just all needs to be kind of a little bit more clear to people about what they can get from me and what I'm all about, so that they can decide whether or not I might be a good resource. So Slow Style Home it is.
Well, perfect. Well, I love hearing a little bit about that. Can you tell us, we're doing this spotlight series on how people in design got their start, because I'm working on a memoir that's going to reveal sort of my 2 decades in the industry and all the highs and lows and trials and tribulations and how I stumbled into this career. I had no intention of becoming an interior designer. And so I think people would be really inspired by hearing a little bit about your entree into this occupation.
Yeah, well, I kind of was interior design adjacent at first. So I'm one of those people that has never known what she wanted to be when she grew up. And so therefore, I have lots of degrees that I am not directly using, although I am grateful for going to graduate school and getting a few things under my belt that has made the life I live now a little bit easier. But none of it was in design. I come from an artistic family, but they were in the performing arts, but still, you're exposed to things, cultural things, when you grow up in a family like that definitely has informed my background in terms of my style and my aesthetic and just kind of what I love to do in life. But I'm going to skip way ahead to the part where I start talking about design a little bit. So after lots of careers and, having 2 kids and moving many homes, it was time to get back to work. I have one of my children has some pretty significant special needs. He's got some intellectual disabilities. And so I really needed something that was going to give me ultimate flexibility, but really feed my soul and feed my need for an outlet of some kind to kind of make sure that I was still a person, that I wasn't just a mom and wasn't, completely consumed by taking care of a kid that needed a lot of things that I had never known anything about. And so that was a lot of research, a lot of medical stuff, a lot of time in hospitals. And I just needed to make sure that I wasn't getting lost in all of that. So, trying to decide how far to go back. Basically, I teamed up with a friend who is also one of the most creative people I've ever met. And we decided we were going to start a blog, a lifestyle blog. Now, this was back, in the days, it's definitely before podcasting, but it was still kind of at the tail end of the blogging craze, in terms of people kind of really being able to build a huge audience on their blogs. So we were struggling with a little bit with getting some traction, and we were finding our voice and we were creating content, and we weren't very focused or anything. Like I said, it was lifestyle, so it was more broad. And then we kind of decided, look, we need to focus this. That interior design is kind of where we merged in terms of our passions. And we knew podcasting was going to start to be a thing. And so we thought, okay, well, what would make a compelling podcast about something that's so visual, interior design? You think what kind of a podcast could you do on interior design? because at the time there were almost no design podcasts. And so we decided, well, we really need to talk about the substance behind the style. We really want to talk about, why does style matter? Why do we care about all these details? Why do we obsess over fringe and drawer pulls and paint colors and patterns and all that kind of thing, especially when the world was so hard and crazy and difficult, and there were so many people suffering, and you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, why do I care so much about slipcovers? And so we kind of needed to find a way to talk about all of this stuff. So we really started the podcast as complete newbies that had no idea what we were doing. And I'm so grateful we did, because it allowed us to very organically figure out what our voice was, what our point of view was, and where we wanted the podcast to kind of fit in the landscape of podcasting. And I think because it was new, we got really lucky, and we got some fairly big names in the design world to be on our show in the early days, because they were also curious about podcasting, because nobody was doing it. So anyway, we did this for a long time. We had this very much just an interview-based show, and that was part of my education as well. So I had been educating myself very seriously for many years about design, all self-taught, playing around in the different homes I lived with, and really, really experimenting and trying things out and training my eye. But being able to talk to designers and interview them was also a part of my education. So fast forward.
How long ago was the podcast? Just to give me, I know
So
you're
we
still doing a
started
podcast, of course, but yes.
Yeah. So we started it in 2015.
Oh, okay. Yes, that was kind of back. That's when I started my podcast, actually.
Okay, right. So we were both very, very few
Mhm.
podcasting, about design.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know I'm rambling a bit. So eventually we parted ways, my co-host and I was really ready to take the show and turn it into something. I wanted to monetize it. I wanted to kind of put my own stamp on it too, I think. So I started trying to teach people kind of how to do what I did, and I started with these design retreats. So I basically just created the best girlfriends weekend I can imagine. I picked fabulous places to stay that were dripping in design lessons. Partnered with some people. Sometimes we went antiquing. We had fabulous food. And we talked about each other's homes and rooms, and I tried to help people think about their visions and all that kind of thing. So I'm still stumbling along, but we're having a great time. Then did that for a few years. Then COVID comes along. Then I think, okay, now everything has to be online. I can't do these retreats anymore. So I start to teach a course that I called Master the Mix. What I found that most people struggle with is figuring out how to mix together what they already have with new things they want to buy, in a way that still feels very cohesive, where they don't have to throw everything out and buy all new, but they have some really sentimental things that maybe they think is not really their style, but they need to incorporate them somehow. So this idea of mixing things together, and I think that's kind of where my sweet spot is figuring out how to make those things work. And I honestly, it's been through trial and error of doing this for 25, 30 years. So I started teaching the class, and of course I'm learning. These are like my guinea pigs. Then I started a membership called the Slow Style Society, which still exists, to kind of continue on this idea of helping people develop their signature style. And then I developed this framework of how to really teach people, because I felt like I was kind of doing it patchwork style, and I really needed a syllabus. I needed a way to make what I'd been doing for 30 years translate to someone in a 4-week course, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I had to think about, how did I teach myself all of these things? What was my process? And in doing that, I kind of worked backward to create now a process that you can use going forward. And then that has now, again, fast forward a little bit, and it just led to a book that is also called Slow Style Home. So I'm very excited about it. I've just recently turned everything into the publisher, so it's kind of out of my hands for a little bit until actually becomes a physical entity in spring of 2025. And then I'll probably be much more involved with it again when I'm on a book tour and all that kind of thing. So that was a little bit spotty, but also long-winded. I hope I didn't bore everyone to death.
Well, I was taking out of it that, again, you sort of had a twisting path as well, like mine, which was, not a straight line, but had this love for the arts in general, had this kind of upbringing that fostered that, and ultimately found your way here.
Yes.
And so then that kind of morphing, and I think it's quite interesting. I think when people start a podcast or any kind of endeavor, whether it's a business or a podcast with someone else, it's hard to have that partnership flow in the same exact direction, just maybe like a marriage sometimes. It's hard to have
Yes.
people constantly growing together with
Yes.
no disruption and always having the same goal, right?
Right.
When maybe
Right.
that goal wasn't even a thing when you started. Maybe you didn't have a vision when you
Exactly. It
started,
wasn't.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And so I find, I talk to tons of people who podcast because I love podcasting. And so whenever somebody podcasts, I have a zillion questions, want to be BFFs because it's such a lonely endeavor, as I'm sure
It
you know, talking
is.
into a microphone and listening to your own voice all the time. But I just think it's fascinating, like I said, not just in podcasting, but in any endeavor to kind of start with a person and have some kind of synergy and then figure out where that goes. I just think it's so hard to keep it on the same path. And then ultimately it can help you to find your own voice. Well, this is
Yeah.
what worked, and this is actually where I want to go. It gives you sort of more wind at your back because you can define yourself while looking at somebody else, while looking in a mirror and saying, oh, I don't want that, but I do want this.
Right. And I wouldn't give that up for anything. I mean, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't had those, I don't know how long it was, maybe 3 years with my business partner where I had somebody to really bounce ideas off of. And we were also both moms of very young children, and she also had a kid with special needs. So, I mean, it was kind of, we was like a marriage. Like we talked about everything, and so it worked very well for a long time. And it's not even that it stopped working as much as it is that we just, like you said, we just wanted different things.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of it was a natural breakup, if you will.
Right. When you're evaluating your goals and saying, I want this and I want this, and that's not the same direction. But then I love how it led you to ultimately finding this slow style. So I thought it'd be so interesting. My listeners are used to hearing me talk about the way that I work, the rules that I apply, the methodology that I've created, but it's always interesting and very important to realize that there's more than one way to get this right. And you want to pick the ideology that resonates with you. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you talk about on your show in terms of that framework for the slow style. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. And I 100% agree with you. I say all the time, there is no one right way, and also my way isn't the way for everyone. And you really need to find the sort of the guide that you resonate with the most. Because I also feel like ultimately beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So there are lots of people that I coach whose houses would look nothing like mine, or really, you would, they don't even look designed, but they're happy in it, right? They love what they see when they look around, and that's my goal. So anyway, and I know we share that goal, so it's just maybe different ways of getting there. Anyway, slow style. So slow style, I really kind of copied the term from the slow food movement, which really was about eating locally grown things cooked in a manner with love and attention to detail without skipping anything, and then savoring the meal afterwards and caring about the community around you, the conversation you're having while you're eating, right? So it was all about it was all a push against fast food and fast everything. And I felt like, boy, that really sums up how I feel about how I've created my homes and how I teach other people to develop their own style, is in this way that's very holistic. It really comes from within. There are some design rules that I talk about I pick ones that I feel like are useful 90% of the time, but I always say there's still 10% of the time the design, you're going to want to break it. So nothing is 100% guaranteed to work. It's so much about playing around and figuring things out and developing your eye. But there are three core tenets to slow style. And I came up with these because I thought I need a foundation that will be true in no matter who's home, what their budget is, what their aesthetic is, what their lifestyle is, what their daily lives are like, who they live with, all that kind of thing. And these are the three truths that I have felt to be really useful to me that I always come back to. And that is, the first one is about life informing style, that first and foremost, you have to take into consideration how your house is functioning and if it's really working for you and in a way that still looks beautiful to you. So for instance, if you have a living room that's full of plastic, brightly colored toys because you have a toddler, that may be functional, that may be working for you as a living space because you can get down on the floor and maybe you've moved the coffee table out of the way, but there's still a piece of it that's not serving you because there's no adult space there. There's no beauty there that is serving you, even if it might be serving your toddler. So there's got to be a meeting of the minds here, and we have to make it work on both levels. The other piece of this life informing style thing is the very basic idea that your story will be your style, that it has to be very personal, that you're going to be pulling from your own life experiences, your memories, your passions, your values, your goals, your beliefs, all of these things, as opposed to trying to copy and paste somebody else's idea of beauty and meaning, right? And I know that's tempting because there are so many designers out there that are doing really beautiful things. And that's mostly where we get our information from, is what the pros are doing. And so it's very tempting to just try to copy that. But I feel like that feels like a bit artificial when you're actually then living in it. And I also feel like it doesn't end up working because their style is not going to perfectly fit on top of your lifestyle. So coming from within is the first rule, the first, what do you want to call it, principle of slow style. The second one is that to create a signature style, it needs to evolve. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to experiment. You need to try things out. So there's a lot of pressure to start with products. And a lot of people go, oh, I'm terrified of buying a couch. It's a big investment. What if it's not the right one? Or a rug, or hiring a painter to paint the walls or whatever. And I really think that unless you are a professional designer, it's very hard to answer those questions like this. So you really do have to take the time to experiment in your own home. You really need to get some paint colors on the wall and feel and look at them in the natural light. You can't just copy what some expert says. My favorite white is Benjamin Moore's Dove, or whatever. It might work, but it might not, because you have completely different natural light than whatever they're working on in the house that they're being paid to work on. So you really do have to try things out. You have to move the furniture around. You have to play around with little vignettes to understand things like scale and visual weight and mix of materials and heights and all those kinds of things. So playing around is very essential. Again, this is if you want to do it yourself and not hire someone. But I really believe that that's the fun part. And that's the part where if you have any inkling that design might be fun, and that it might also be an opportunity for you to do some personal development and reflection and grow and really see yourself reflected back at you, then that experimentation part to me is the best part. So that's the slow part. And I'm saying this as a very impatient person. I love a ta-da, instant makeover too, just as much as the next person. But the sort of the fact that you kind of have to take your time if you're figuring this out on your own is where all the juice is. That's where the meat is. And then the last principle has to do with our values, and just that our values are embedded in our homes, whether we know it or not. And this last one really started coming into play over the past several years as I was developing this framework and just seeing so much disposable decor out there and so many trends and so much pressure to keep up, and how quickly the trends would fade, and how you didn't know, was this a fad or was this going to be a trend that lasted 20, 30 years, or that was kind of riffing off of a trend that was from 50 years or 100 years ago? Very hard to figure all that out. So I really started looking at the whole supply chain of decor, the whole decor industry, and realizing that that just can't be separate. To me, it has to be a part of how we think about our homes. We have an impact on our larger world, and what we do, how we discard things, how we buy things, where they come from, how things are made, who's getting paid for them, all of that really, really became a big part of Slow Style. But I broadened it a little bit to say your values can be about anything. I mean, I'm talking a lot about environmental values or socioeconomic values, but I mean, your values could be about generosity and graciousness, and so therefore, the way in which you stock your bar is a reflection of your style. The fact that you have nice cocktail napkins is a reflection of your style. So it's not just about the environment, but it is a lot of it is simply because we're talking about the procurement of objects and stuff.
Yeah.
So those are the three foundational principles. That's like the mindset, and then and then it has nothing to do with the actual steps, the actual framework. But I do like to talk about the mindset, because I think that if any of that doesn't appeal to you, then you might not, Slow Style might not be for you. But if that's kind of resonating, then
I don't know if I'd go that far, because as you were outlining these three kind of tenets, I was thinking to myself at how different they are from the way that I work, from the way that I speak about design, and yet intriguing, right? Like, I think you said that you came from a performing arts background in terms of your family. And
yeah.
as I was thinking about kind of talking to you, it reminds me of different acting teachers, right? And the
Okay.
different schools of thought, and they feel
Yes.
completely different.
Right.
And, one person will have you dig into your own memories in order
Yep.
to come up with a great line read or to really feel that connection with your scene partner. Whereas another person will say, don't draw from your own memories. The character is not you,
Yep.
right? Spend more
Yep.
time outlining your character and things like that. So I think there's value as a thespian in taking from both, right?
Right. Right.
Because I wanted to come back at you with each core tenant and say, what about, but how about this? And
I
what
love
about
it.
this?
I love it.
And
Yeah.
so I think that people who are saying, I'm not sure, there's just so much to like and to learn, and then maybe take what works for you and leave the rest. So it sounds like these three tenets are kind of a must if you want to really follow it 100%, the Slow Style. But maybe you can pick and choose. Maybe learning more about any one of them could kind of give you a way in to another one. Because I think the
And I
values.
think too, sorry, I think too,
Yeah.
there is room for interpretation. Like
Mhm.
how people are going to interpret these things, I think is important, valuable, and necessary as well.
And now it's time for a quick commercial break. Everybody, of course, is going to put their own information. Like when I was hearing these, I was like, but wait, my clients love to cut and paste from other designers. And I
Mhm.
think maybe their response to those pictures that they see on, in a magazine or online could really bring up those personal memories, right? So
Exactly.
maybe they don't even know why they're responding to this picture, but they just love it. It feels like home. They can't put their finger on it. And I think there could be a lot of subconscious things going on there that still make the cutting and the pasting of the image very valid.
Right. Right.
Even if how that person is actually living in their home is not going to work for you, right? There's no toy
Right.
storage. They have sharp corners and you have that toddler, whatever, right?
Right.
But
Right.
there's something about that that's speaking to you, even that hidden part of you that you're not consciously thinking of. And I also love the values bit. I was even thinking, people who allow their pets on the furniture versus
Mhm.
people who don't, right? And one is
That's a
not
value.
wrong and one is not
Absolutely.
right, but it's a total value. And And so I think that that's quite interesting because a lot of times something that I have a strong reaction to is when people post their values in their house, like verbatim. I hate
Oh,
word art. This is
you
what
mean like the signs? Oh my gosh.
I
What
hate
can
the
those
signs.
please die? Can those please just die?
And some of my customers even want custom signs. So like,
I
Betsy,
know.
we're going to get a sign made that says, these are our family rules, which I love that you have family rules. I love that you have family values. Do we need to frame them? My answer would be no.
Yeah.
But I think your home should reflect your feelings, right? If you want people to be tidy and respect the space, you need to give them places to put things away. You can't
Right.
have that pristine home with the glass coffee table with no shelf underneath for a basket for their markers, right? Because then you're not setting them up to exhibit that value that's so important to you.
Exactly. Very
So
well
I
said.
think that sometimes the furniture pieces can speak for you, the way
Mhm.
that you've set up your home so that when people come in, they feel welcome. There's a place to sit down. If you expect them to take up their shoes, again, another value, right?
Right. Right.
So I just think there's so many ways to express that. And I love that that's so foundational to your idea, right?
Yeah. I think because it's subconscious, I don't think people they live how they live, right? We buy what we buy. A lot of people don't think a lot about what they're buying unless it's a very expensive piece. Um, and they don't think about like it's not. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a decision with the very first time you ever have your very first dog about whether or not it's going to snuggle with you on the couch. But once you've made that decision, it's like, of course, to some people, right?
Right.
Whereas other people would be like, that's never going to happen.
Right.
So I think we do a lot of this stuff without rethinking. And I guess what I want to pull to the forefront is this idea that your values are on display whether you know it or not. And so let's make sure we're intentional about it. If you really do care about XYZ, then let's make sure your home is working to support you having those values. And you just gave the best example with like the markers in a basket in a very formal living room, or you need to set your kid up for success to live in a house that where you value structure and that kind of thing, and respect for objects and all that. Then yeah, you gotta make sure your house is supporting you in those goals.
Or like if you value their artistry, give them places, that are near you to be doing this art so that that can
Right.
be cultivated versus saying you only can do it in the playroom and then
Right.
they don't see you, they don't want to spend time there. So I just think
Yep.
it just brought up so many ideas for me as you were describing that section. Unlike the experiment and play, which I did not like that section.
I want to hear
Because
why.
I am one of those people. I want to set it and forget it.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
initially, I like to explore and make sure I have the right answer. You don't just want to walk into a space and assume you know the layout or assume
Right.
you know what's going to work for you, which I think a lot of people feel pressure to walk into a space and have the answer, right?
Yes.
Oh, couch goes here because fireplace is there. Oh, wait, chair goes here because window
Yep.
is here. So I feel like that's too restrictive, and there should be some room for ideation at the beginning. What does work for me? What do I want to do in here? But oh my gosh, the idea of moving that couch on the regular, no way.
Yeah.
So,
And you're not alone.
yeah, it feels so time consuming, one, which is maybe, anti-slow movement on my part, that impatience, right? But also, I think a lot of it depends. If you're listening to a design podcast, you're into design.
Yep.
If you're a design client, you really just want to get this thing over with.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's like going to the dentist or something. Just make my teeth
Yes.
shiny and let's get out of here. So
Exactly.
I guess as working with a lot of clients, I'm like, let's find the answer in an hour. And then let's
Right.
move
Right.
on and keep it this way for the next 7 years.
Right. Right.
And I
Right.
think, I worked at a firm as an apprentice for Tom Felicia from Queer Eye. And
Oh
one of
yeah.
my fellow interns lived in a studio apartment. We both lived in separate studios. And every time I'd go to her studio, which was very small, 300 square feet or something, it would be rearranged
Uh-huh.
every single time. And I mean, how many permutations can you do in
Not a
300 square
lot in
feet with a
300
queen
square
bed?
feet. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like what is going on here? But every week, that was just so exciting for her and
Yeah.
really kept things fresh and made living in a studio more sort of exciting.
Right.
Whereas I seriously moved in, created my floor plan, and did not change it for 7
Right.
years.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think that could just be an element of an approach, or maybe people who are just really, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so
Is it a
I
personality?
mean, I don't see them as being up on two different sides. I feel like you can, again, you can interpret slow however you want to. What I say to people is, when you get it feeling really good to you and you really like it, just check in with yourself every once in a while and just sit there with a cup of wine, a tea or wine or whatever, and just go, do I still love that painting? Do I still love what I'm seeing in the bookshelves? Do I still love how I've arranged a vignette? Or how is this chair still comfortable? And allow yourself to futz with it over time if it's not still giving you, and sometimes it's not even that you don't love something anymore, but when it's sitting in the same place, displayed in the same way for many years, you do stop seeing it. And it's
Mm.
okay to put it in storage for a minute and refutz and redo and be like, oh my gosh, and move it to a bedroom instead of a living room. And all of a sudden you appreciate it again. So that's one aspect of the slow part, is that you may if you love a place, your room, for 7 years, that's fantastic. I don't leave it for 7 years. um it's whenever you get tired of it, whenever you decide, okay, it's starting to not lift me up anymore, I'm not delighted anymore. And these feelings are very fine-tuned. They're very they're not huge, obvious, like hit you in the face, like, oh my God, I hate my room. It's more just like, you know what? I don't think I've felt terribly inspired the past few months when I've come into this room like I used to. You kind of have to make yourself notice it.
Mm.
But then the other aspect of the reason why I love slow style is that, to me, it's the way in which you learn about what you really love, why things work, the combination of colors or patterns or objects, shapes, those kinds of things. Um, if you want to do this yourself, if you get pleasure and joy out of that, then the best way to do it is observing what the pros do and really paying attention. I mean, really digging into the details. Don't just like flip the pages of a magazine, but study, and playing around with what you already own to try to mimic that, so that you can understand, oh, that's why this works. That's why this shape works. That's why this table height works, or the back of a chair height. Um, so the slow piece, it's two parts. It's the experimental, taking the time to experiment if you want to do it yourself, but then it's also this idea that making sure your house stays alive to you and relevant to you and really reflects who you are, as opposed to becoming sort of this dusty museum that you just stop looking at. And in that case, we're talking about a longer time span. I mean, I hope you love your living room for 7 to 10 years before you want to change it. But at some point you're going to grow, and it needs to grow too.
Right. And I like that idea of putting something in a new context, like moving the bookends from the hallway
Mhm.
to the family room, and all of a sudden you see them differently because the light
Right.
hits them differently and you're in that room more often. So while it's not something I've done, now you've made me curious. While, I don't walk around my house being like, does this room still inspire me? I'm like, does this room still feel done? Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah,
good. Let me
right,
keep
right,
moving
right,
on.
right.
I think there's so much more to explore. So, Zandra,
Okay.
if people are excited by these ideas, if they want to learn more, where can they find you? Where should they go?
Sure. So everything is at slowstylehome.com. You can find the podcast there with, show notes and pictures and all that kind of stuff. But if you'd rather just go straight to the podcast, obviously that's on your podcast player of choice, whatever you're listening to right now, Slow Style Home. And then also on the website, you will see a little bit about me and a little bit about the philosophy, and two things I offer. I offer one-on-one, I call it coaching, because again, I'm not coming in and designing for you. I'm taking you through my process, which is 4 steps to it, where we kind of help you. We start with one room, kind of help you figure out what you want to experience and feel in the room. And I kind of help you figure out how to do it on your own. And then we also have the Slow Style Society, which is just an ongoing monthly membership. We meet once a month for Q&A and a little project and that kind of thing, just to kind of keep your toes dipped in the style design world, if that's your jam. So yeah, so that's about it. And then again, the book will be out in spring 2025. So that's going to be a while from now.
Well, not that long. Time flies when you're having fun and when you're dealing with the book back end. I can tell you that much. But it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. I'm sure we'll talk many more times. I certainly hope we will.
Yes. Oh, I absolutely we will. I'm very much looking forward to it.
And thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom. And guys, please go check out Zandra's podcast, Slow Style Home. I know you're going to find a wealth of information. She just did a really cool podcast on her publishing deal and how she got it. And I myself am going through some of these steps, and it was really nice to hear somebody else share their journey, because I think a lot of this is cloaked in kind of secrecy. You'd be
Very
surprised
much.
what you have to
Yeah.
go through.
Yeah.
So head over there, check out her episodes, and we will be talking to you again. Well, Zandra won't. I will be talking to you again. Maybe with another guest, maybe not. Maybe it'll just be me answering your questions per usual. If you have a question, go to affordableinteriordesign.com/podcast, send it in. And until next time, bye everybody. A big thank you to our amazing producer, Catherine Heller, to Aton and the MBCR House Band, and to Affordable Interior Design, the sponsor of this podcast and the premier place to get an amazing look on a budget. Check out affordableinteriordesign.com. If you guys love the show, the very best way to support us is by spreading the word. Tell your friends or write us an awesome review on iTunes. So until next week, guys, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.